Hey guys, it's Casey. I'm going to post a video today about addiction. And I do want to warn people, there could be some triggers in this video. So if you feel like it's going to trigger you, then please don't watch it. I'm going to kind of share my experience with addiction, what my opinion on the addiction is, and stuff like that. I do want to start out by saying I feel like addiction is a serious epidemic we've got going on. And I'm not just talking about the illegal drugs. I'm talking about prescription drugs people abuse and stuff like that. I'm also talking about people that abuse alcohol, which they're called alcoholics. But I'm going to just say addiction just to cover everything. A little backstory on addiction and my experience with addiction is my mom is a recovering alcoholic. My mom has been sober. It will be 30 years March 23rd this coming year. She got sober when I was 9 months old. And even though she's been sober that long, she still struggles with, the stress and stuff. And my mom's been through a lot of stuff. My mom's been through hell and back, and there's a lot of times where most people would break going through the stuff she's gone through, and she never has because her desire to drink wasn't more powerful than her desire to stay sober. Her desire to not go back to that lifestyle. And I applaud her for that. I am very proud of her, and she takes it day by day. Because I've actually remember there's a gentleman I remember who he was sober, I think, 10 years. And he went out and started drinking again, and then he started abusing drugs again. He actually just passed away, I think, last year. And the thing is, addiction's not an easy thing to deal with, and I feel like, in my opinion, the way addiction is a lot of people turn to addiction because they've had something happen to them, whether they've been sexually abused as a child, physically abused as a child, sexually abused as an adult, physically abused as an adult, in a domestic violence situation and stuff like that. People decide to turn to the addiction because they're like, oh, well, this is the Band-Aid that's just going to cover my wound and I ain't got to deal with it. But the thing is, when it comes to that wound, sticking a Band-Aid over it's not going to really do anything, unless you really take care of that wound. It's going to end up getting infected, and there's at times it's going to cost you your life, with addiction, there's only very few outlets with it, if you're lucky by the grace of God, you're going to get that sobriety. If not, you're going to end up overdosing on your drugs, or you're going to end up being in a bad situation, somewhere where you shouldn't be to get your drugs, and you're going to end up getting killed. Or, you've also got you're going to end up in jail, because of your drugs and stuff. And the thing is with addiction is it doesn't just affect that person. It affects their family. It affects their friends. It affects their children. It affects their jobs. It affects everybody around them. And being an addict, most people don't think about that. They're just thinking about, where can I get that next high at? When am I going to get that next drink at? The backstory on my stepdad is he did masonry work. And he actually went to DC, he went to Louisiana. I mean, he went all over the place. He actually got personally requested to go to certain places and do masonry work, and he got paid a lot of money. He ended up throwing that away because of his addiction. Growing up as a kid, I didn't realize that he was an addict. I knew he was an alcoholic, because I remember growing up, him and my mom would come home, from him being out the bar drinking and stuff, and they would fight, I thought, okay, they're just fighting, because he's drunk and stuff. It wasn't until I was a lot older, till my mom told me, a lot of the reasons they were fighting is because he was abusing pain pills and he was also a meth addict. And it got to the point that he abused drugs so much, he ended up losing his job. He actually ended up going into complete liver failure, and he actually got a liver transplant February 16th, 2003. And I want to say, I think he stayed clean about 2 years, and then he went back to his addiction. And his excuse for that was he missed his friends. That was his excuse on why he quit drinking, or why he went back to drinking and stuff. And then it just escalated from there. It got to where he started abusing his pain pills again. It got to where, he turned to meth again. And my mom and him actually ended up divorcing because my mom was like, I'm not going through this again. I'm not doing this again. And it's amazing, because I tried to help him out the best I could, because that's the kind of person I am. I try to help people out. I don't want people to go without. I would go out to the place he lived, which he lives in a little shack out in the middle of nowhere. And I would, go to the store grocery shopping for him, go pick up his prescriptions for him, take him to a doctor's appointment if I could and stuff. And, I remember being probably about 16 or 17, and he ended up calling me and he was like, hey, he's like, do you and your friend want to make some money? And I was like, yeah, I'll make some money. I'm a teenager. Yeah, I'll make some money. He's like, I need you guys to go to Walmart and buy some Sudafedrin. So I'm like, all right. So me and my friend, we go get some Sudafedrin. We drop it off. We get $30 out of it. And I'm like, oh, awesome. I got $30. And I remember sitting there in my car and being like, wait a minute. Sudafedrin. That's used to make meth, isn't it? And so I ended up calling my mom because she was teaching out of town. And I was like, hey, Mom, I'm like, you've been around the block a few times. And my mom joked, she says, only once. She's only been around the block once. And I said, my stepdad had me go and buy some Sudafedrin for him. I was like, isn't that stuff used to make drugs? She's like, yeah, it is, And I was like, oh, okay, And so after that incident, I pretty much distanced myself from him because I was like, it just amazes me that, you were willing to put me at jeopardy, to go get this stuff for your addiction and stuff. And then it wasn't till I was, let's see, 24, 25 that I ended up going back in contact with my stepdad. And I basically, would go to the store for him, go pick up his prescriptions, take him to the doctor if he needed me to, and stuff like that. And I remember sitting there, and out of the blue, we were just briefly talking, and he was like, yeah, he's like, everybody says I'm on meth. And I was like, okay. Well, I also know that there's history of that because he always says he had bugs, but most time there was no bugs there. And if you're familiar with people that are meth addicts, that's one of the side effects I've always got told. You always feel like you have bugs and stuff crawling on you. And I was like, oh, yeah. And he's like, yeah. He's like, only reason I do meth is so I have the energy. And I'm like, okay. And I was thinking to myself, but last I understood with meth, isn't it? Which I could be wrong. So if I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments below. Last time I knew with meth, it's like, yeah, you do have energy, but you end up having with like a complete crash for like 2 to 3 days or something like that. And I was like, okay, whatever, so I basically told him, hey, one thing I ask, don't be doing that stuff, when I come out here, it's your house, but please don't do that stuff when I come out here. He's like, okay, I won't. And so I remember pulling up there, so many times, and I remember thinking to myself, is this going to be the day? Is this going to be the day I'm going to walk in that house, and he's going to be dead on the floor from an overdose. Last I knew, he's still very much alive and kicking. And it was hard to watch that, and it was emotionally draining, it was mentally draining to me, because here, this is the man who adopted me when I was 13 years old, told everybody I was his daughter. And even though we had some rough times, he still always, I guess you could say, did the best he could, given his situation, to make sure I didn't do without. And I kind of got to the point that I kind of started to distance myself again. Because I was like, mentally and emotionally, I can't handle dealing with this stuff, and I was going through enough mental and emotional problems myself at the time due to my situation I was in, being out of a violent relationship. And, he got to where he would snap at me, he'd yell at me for doing something, and I was just like, what, I can't do this again. I remember one time walking into his house and him being like, you see that bottle over there? And I'm like, yeah, and it was a pill bottle. He's like, you see them bugs in there? And there was nothing in there. And I'm like, no. He's like, there's bugs. They're right there in the corner. He's like, I dug those out of my arm. And I was like, oh my God, wow. You're like, wow, this is what this drug does to you. My stepdad's lost part of his foot, because one, he's diabetic and doesn't take care of himself. Two, because when he does his drugs, he thinks he has bugs on him. There was actually at one point he was actually hospitalized because he was actually shooting up bug killers in his veins, because he said he had bugs. There was, a point to where he would probably spend $200 a month on getting all this bug killer stuff. We're talking lice shampoo, we're talking bug bombers, we're talking bug spray, and stuff like that. And I didn't know how to address it, because I'm like, I don't know what to do, he's got a problem and stuff like that, but he's a very confrontational man. So I was like, I don't want to confront this and put myself in a bad situation. And so I got to the point where I pretty much started slowly cutting ties with him, and it was a hard decision to make, because I didn't want him to go without having somebody there to give him food, to go to the store for him, somebody to go take him to get his prescription, somebody to go take him to the doctor and stuff like that. But I knew it had gotten to that point that his addiction had overcome him so much that nothing I could say or do, was going to change his opinion on it. And that's probably one of the hardest things on dealing with addiction is when you watch a loved one go through it or even a friend go through it, you feel completely hopeless and defeated because you can sit there and say something to that somebody and, they may be like, okay, yeah, you're right, I got a problem, and you get clean. Or they may be like, oh, no, I don't got a problem, And that's the thing with an addict is they're not going to get help unless they want help. You can sit there and tell them until you're blue in the face, you got a problem, you need to get help, you need to stop, and they're not going to change unless they want to. And us as prideful people, and a lot of us are very prideful, you don't want to admit, hey, I've got a problem and I need help. And even when I moved to where I'm at now, I didn't even tell him, that I was moving. I hadn't talked to him in probably 1 or 2 months. Didn't even tell him I was leaving because I was like, I can't, I can't go out there. I can't go through that. He had just gotten hospitalized, for the, God knows, umpteenth time, because of him not taking care of himself. I actually remember him calling, I think he called my mom, and he was like, somebody did an adult wellness check, and I'm going to go to the hospital, and my mom's like, okay, and he had a dog at the time that actually I had given to him, when he was a puppy and stuff. He actually had taken him because I couldn't keep him, and I was like, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to go get Dodge. And so I went out and got Dodge, and I remember just crying out there, and as angry as I was at him because, of the stupid stuff he's doing, the problems he's causing himself, he doesn't realize what he's doing to himself, he doesn't realize the emotional toll it has on me and on my mom, and I just remember being angry and then being sad and then just being like, God, why? Why can't he see he's got a problem? Why can't he get his act together? Why can't he be, the man that he used to be, one that used to laugh and, stuff like that. And it's because of this disease, it's because of this addiction, and people will tell you, don't be mad at the person, yeah, that person chooses to, do the drugs and stuff like that. So, you can be like, well, yeah, that's why I'm mad at him. It's more or less in my case, it's just I'm mad at the addiction. I'm mad at this disease that it is. And I feel like it is a disease, I've actually had friends I know that have struggled with addiction. I had a girl that I knew from high school that she ended up losing all of her kids because of her addiction. And I remember talking to her almost every single day, being like, hey, just remember, getting high ain't worth losing them kids for good, Just remember that last high, is not going to help you get those kids back. And she did great, for the longest time. She was doing wonderful. She was clean. She was sober, And I was like, yes, finally, someone's going to get it right. She's going to get clean, she's going to stay clean and stuff like that. And last I knew, she went out and got high. She didn't think of, her babies not having their mom in her life now, because all she thought about was getting high. I've watched people that were addicts that are like, oh, they're never going to get sober, they're never going to get clean, and they've reached that sobriety, and for those of you that, have reached that sobriety, you deal with that addiction on a daily basis, and it's a daily battle, I applaud you, I'm proud of you, keep it up, you're an inspiration, maybe one of these days your story can be told, and you can inspire somebody else to stay clean, or you can inspire somebody to say something to somebody that they know that has a problem. And that's the thing, and I myself never have struggled with any drug addictions. I did struggle with being an alcoholic, and I didn't realize I was an alcoholic for the longest time there. It wasn't until about 2 years ago I realized that I had a problem. And basically, looking back now, I realized I had a severe problem with alcohol. It got to where when my work week would start, I'd be like, oh man, I can't wait till Friday because I'm going to go out, I'm going to drink, I'm going to party Saturday, and stuff like that. And it got to where, that literally was like the entire highlight of my week. I didn't care about whether work had done good, nothing. I mean, all I was excited for was, man, when Friday gets here, I'm going to go out and party. And then I would use the excuses, which addicts will use excuses, I use the excuse of, well, I work all week, so I'm entitled to be able to wind down, Well, I'm raising 4 kids on my own, so, I'm entitled to go out and have a conversation with an adult. And when I would go out and sit there and you'd be like, okay, I'm not going to drink, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to drink me some water, I'm going to drink me some soda, I'm going to sit here and talk. I would almost psych myself out to the point of like, man, I need to have me a couple beers or I'm not going to be able to talk, And that's where I got to the point I was like, oh, well, if I don't go out here and go get me them couple beers, I'm going to be too anxious and nervous and too, uncomfortable to try and talk to people, and I came up with excuse after excuse after excuse, which addicts do. I mean, you're going to come up with excuse after excuse after excuse, and a lot of it, like I said, is deep rooted into a lot of problems, whether, like I said, you were sexually abused as a kid, you were physically abused as a kid, you were sexually abused as an adult, you were physically abused as an adult, you were in a domestic violence situation, you watched a family member grow up being an addict or an alcoholic, or that's the only lifestyle you've known and stuff. It's a cycle that you got to break. You got to choose to break. I mean, look at me. I had a sample of both worlds. I got to grow up in an AA hall, but at the same time, I got to watch my stepdad drink, and pretty much drink himself into a grave almost, and I ended up having a problem drinking. It wasn't until about 2 years ago, it'd be almost 3 years ago this coming year, that I realized I had a problem. In fact, my husband now had actually come up to my hometown to meet me and the kids and stuff for my son's birthday. And I remember him being there and being like, man, yeah, we're going to go out and we're going to party, we're going to have fun and all this stuff. And he kept trying to tell me, he's like, look, I drove up here, to spend time with you and the kids. I don't want to go out and party. And I ended up getting mad at him for it. I'm like, really? I'm like, you don't want to go out and party? Why? I didn't stop and think, looking back now, I didn't stop and think, he does have combat PTSD from being in the military, and he does have an anxiety. I didn't stop and think, well, he's got all these problems because he was in the military. He's not going to be comfortable going into a bar, and being around a bunch of people, especially if drunk people. And, let's face it, sometimes you got drunk people that act like total jackasses. That's not going to be a good situation for him because that's going to upset him and that's going to trigger him. All I could think about was my own selfishness. Well, I want to go out and party. You need to go out and party. You know, and I was lucky, you know, because I could have ruined, you know, our friendship. You know, I could have ruined ever being, you know, a part of his life again. You know, thankfully he forgave me. You know, we just came up on, you know, 1 year of marriage and stuff like that. You know, and it took me realizing when he had made the comment, you know, I came up here to spend time with you and the kids, to get to know you and the kids more. You know, it took me to realize all that stuff for me to really be like, I think I got a problem, you know. And there's some stuff, you know, that I'm never going to be able to solve because of the decisions I made, you know, when I decided I wanted to go out and drink instead of being a parent, you know. There's some crosses I'm going to have to bear, you know. There's some stuff, you know, my kids have had to go through, you know, that I'm going to have to bear that cross because I realized that I was more interested in going to get drunk than being a mom to my kids. Does that make me a bad mom? No, it doesn't. It just shows that I made some bad decisions, you know. And that's the thing is with anybody that has an addiction of any type, you know, you can't save them all, you know. The best thing you can do is try to help them, you know, just let them know, hey, I'm here for you. You know, don't enable them. Like if you're like, man, you know, I know she's going to come over and she's going to get that $20. She's going to go to the liquor store and she's going to go get drunk. But she's got to borrow that $20 from me, you know, don't do it. You know, but most of all, you know, you got to make sure you take care of your mental and emotional health first. Because if you are mentally and emotionally drained and stressed out, then all that person that is struggling with that addiction is going to do is they're going to mentally and emotionally drain you more. You know, so if you guys have ever been in a situation like this, if you have a story you would like to share with me, please leave a comment down below. If this video touched you, please like it, please share it. You know, if I could get out and just help one person, you know, I feel like that's at least one person I've helped save. I want to thank you guys for your time. Thank you for your patience, and please stay strong and keep fighting.